All right. Hello, everyone. You are listening to the Minding Mind podcast, where we live life with ease, connection, and permission to just be. I'm your host, Evelyn LeVasseur, and welcome back to another episode. Today, I am sitting down with a mother-daughter duo, Donnica and Ro'nita Hawes-Saunders, and they are the host of the Raised by Her podcast. I can't wait to get into this conversation because you know that legacy work is part of my heart work. And today we're going to talk about turning generational lessons into leadership. Let me tell you about this duo first. Raised by Her is a mother-daughter podcast unpacking the lessons, love, and lived experiences passed down across generations. Through honest, intergenerational conversations, hosts Ro'nita and Donnica explore womanhood, identity, and the wisdom we inherit and sometimes challenge. Together, they reflect on how the stories that raised us shape who we become as leaders and as women. Part humor and all heart, a reminder that every generation has something to teach. Ladies, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
I'm excited to get into this conversation. Let's just start with what made you decide to start a podcast together?
I'll begin. Thank you. During the pandemic, because we could not be together in the way that we had in the past, I was living in one city and Donnica was in Washington, D.C., and we began to have what I consider to be longer and longer telephone conversations. And we decided at some particular time, this would be really great if at some point we might have a podcast, just talking about the various things that we could go into depth with about what we were missing, why we were missing it, our day-to-day life, and what our country was going through at that particular time. And so my daughter being very creative and also really interested in us doing this, didn't let it go, because when life began to change back to normal, whatever normal was after the pandemic, I got extremely busy. But she said, Mom, we really still need to go ahead and do this. And so at some point we did.
Yeah, I love that because so many people actually desire to be able to interact with their families in that way, but they don't often have the ability to go deeper into conversation, to acknowledge things that you're trying to heal from without somebody else feeling, I guess, attacked or like you let them down, for example. I'm just giving an example from my personal life when there are things that I discuss that I maybe wish were different, or I wish I had learned different, or maybe I wish I hadn't experienced, I guess. I do see that my dad specifically gets very almost hurt when he hears that something hurt me in the past. He hears it as he didn't do right by me. And, that's never like I look at my daughters and I know that I'm a fantastic mother. And I really give them the ability to just be who they are without expectation of who I think they should be. And I also know that I am going to make mistakes. And there are things that I am doing that they're going to have to unlearn, because the truth is I'm still healing myself. So I think that I love the idea that the two of you can sit and have these very honest, very real conversations, especially during an incredibly difficult time the world was going through, and not take offense to the things that you want to be different, or maybe the things that you learned. How did you navigate having these open, honest conversations and just acknowledging that your experiences are totally different, but they're still just rooted in the same love?
Oh, I love that description. It's such a good question. I give all of the credit for our ability to have these types of conversations to my mother, but for her either like resilience, her empowerment, her healedness, the therapy that she's gone through, that I've gone through as well, I don't think that these types of conversations would be able to happen. And then when I think about some other folks in my family, to your point, Evelyn, and I try to have these types of conversations, these deeper, it doesn't always sit well because of whatever they've gone through or how they are perceiving what I'm saying, when really I'm just asking for some true, honest advice or some true and honest healing to happen. But, you folks have to be able to to come from a place of comfort to be able to have those conversations. And so I give all credit to my mother. But I think that's a really good question, actually, Mommy. How do you show up as a mom to make sure that I could feel this way?
I think, and most mothers probably go through this when you are young and you think, wow, when I grow up, when I'm a mother, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to say the because I said so kind of things that mommy used to say. And I remember thinking specifically at some particular time, when I have a daughter, I am going to not only share with her some of these experiences and have some of the conversations that my mother would not have at the time. She would talk about the fact that's not age appropriate. Well, if I'm asking the question, then I would think it would be age appropriate. I realized that in her generation and in my grandmother's generation, there were things that ladies just didn't talk about. There were things in the family that really made the family members uncomfortable. And so as I grew further as an adult, I found out things that it would have been nice to know earlier, but I also found out some of the reasons why they didn't discuss those things in having conversations with my cousins. Because again, I didn't know if they were wondering these things. And so we would talk about that. My mother was from a large family. She had 10 brothers and sisters. And so fortunately, very close in terms of connection and honest conversation when we became teenagers and adults.
How do you think that they navigate, or was honest conversation the norm?
It wasn't that, I don't think it was the norm for that particular time when my mother was born in 1930. So, I mean, growing up, and she had me when she was 20 years old. So, it was challenging. The norm was to be able to work hard to make sure that you had a good education. Her mother, as well as my grandmother, had really emphasized education. So the norm was to make sure generations that come afterwards would have opportunities. And so all of my aunts and uncles had to have a certain amount of education. But in terms of open, honest communication about what was really happening in the family, or some of those hurts and pains and different things that would occur, didn't happen until a little bit later in life for me and for my family.
Yeah, yeah. I look at my personal, my larger family life, and my parents, same thing. Both of them came from very large families. My mom, one of 8, my dad, one of 13, which blows my mind because I cannot imagine being pregnant for 14 years or whatever. Cannot imagine that.
I understand that. I said that to my grandmother. How could you go through pregnancy time and time and time again? So
Yeah, to be pregnant for over a decade sounds insane to me, but also God bless them.
yes,
They
yes.
grew up in very different circumstances. Their upbringings were very difficult. And for our family, it's myself and I have a brother and 2 sisters. There are 4 of us. Our childhood was very rooted in survival. You make sure the bills are paid, there's food on the table, we're taken care of, and yes, we were loved. I always felt very loved, but I didn't feel seen, right? I didn't feel like feelings and desires and dreams were ever even up for discussion. And I recognize that they didn't have the luxury of looking at life that way. If life was rooted in survival, then they were giving me the foundation of safety, right? Physical safety. So now Evelyn today can say, I'm so grateful that they gave me that level of physical safety because it gave me the luxury now of mental emotional healing and providing my daughters with safety on that physical, mental, and emotional part, right? So, like, I am excited to see what they do should they choose to be mothers someday. Like, how much does this healing, this inner work, this sense of loving who you are, how much does that get to snowball into something better with every generation that passes? And it kind of makes me feel good instead of looking at what I didn't have, to look at all the things that I did have and how I can take that and shape my daughter's experiences differently as well. But something that you mentioned also just reminded me of the fact that there are things that hurt us and shaped us when we were little. And in choosing to do things differently with my daughter, some specific things, I can actually feel myself heal in real time. I remember there were times where I was corrected in certain ways, or expectations were made very clear to me, and this little Evelyn felt such shame, right? Such shame. And shame is not a motivator for change. Shame is just a pain, right? So when I handle things differently, I remember one very specific time when my oldest was younger. I reprimanded her in a way that I literally saw myself in her eyes. The little shamed me was staring back at me. And it was like that was the catalyst for me to say, you get to do things differently. You have to do things differently. She doesn't deserve to feel this way. And I recognize that with each difficult conversation, with each time that I meet them where they are and not where I expect them to be, there's a little part of me that heals too. Like watching them accept themselves, I can feel the younger Evelyn in me also finding release and comfort and more acceptance too. So I love, Ro'nita, how you were able to recognize the gifts that your mom gave you and then transfer that to having beautiful conversations with your daughter as well.
How did you feel about some of those difficult conversations, and how did you sort of navigate the time that we would lay on the bed in the bedroom and just talk for hours and hours about life?
I mean, looking back, I have a lot of gratitude around it, obviously. But at the time, I probably took it, I don't know if I took it for granted, but I was just like, oh, this is what we do, if you will. And so it was a part of our relationship that I could rely on. And then it gave me an extra layer of comfort to know that that we even could have those conversations. You told a story, Mother, that I didn't even remember on our last episode about how I called you from college very late at night.
Yes.
And perhaps, not in the right mindset that one might usually call their parents. And I was so shocked that I had done that. I had no memory of doing it. But I think that speaks to the fact that in my teenage years, we would lay on the bed and have those conversations. I mean, you and my father, but certainly you really were, to Evelyn's point, my safety net. And so when I had those or when I had those challenges, or I had a question that I wanted answered, I knew that that you were the person that I could come to.
Donnica, were you always aware that what you had was unique and very special, or did you assume everyone's household ran the same way?
I assumed everyone's household ran the same way until I got to college. I think that was my first example that, oh my gosh, I have grown up in somewhat of a bubble, as people do, but that there are a variety of different experiences showing up to this campus. And I am very fortunate and very privileged to be able to have had that particular relationship. And then also, oh, I want to be able to share this with others. And so another reason for our podcast is that my mother doesn't just mother me, she mothers my friends, she mothers broader networks in her professional experience. I don't know if mother is the correct, leader might be another word for it, but there's certainly that empathy and compassion that she brings to her leadership that I think is extremely helpful, because not everybody, to your point, has been able to have that experience. So again, I just give all credit back to back to you, Mother. But I also know that it took a lot. You've gone through a ton of therapy, and you've gone through you read and you meditate, and you have done all the things to help you kind of get to that next level. And that's also the example for me about, okay, how can I continue to rise to the next level?
Okay, now I want to know, because I wonder, when I speak to people, this seems to be a universal experience, but when you are very grounded and very centered in who you are, right? And you have this mental, emotional safety to have these open conversations, you are constantly uncovering new levels of you. You are peeling back layers of who you are, and on this lifelong journey of reconnecting to who you originally intended to be. How do you feel that elevating yourself mentally and emotionally impacts the relationships that you have in your life. And for me, I found that I got to a point where I felt like I really couldn't relate to the people that I was close to in the same way, friends and certain family members. And I really felt a piece of them resented my growth. I recognize now that a lot of it had to do with, first of all, when somebody is growing and changing, you go through a sense of loss, right? A sense of loss in that relationship, and you kind of mourn the relationship that you had. But also, if you're not ready to do any mental, emotional work, then it kind of shines a light on the things that you're not doing for yourself and really puts a stress on the relationship. Did either of you notice this in your life?
Absolutely. I think certainly with friendships, and overall relationships. I mean, specifically, my husband and I, we've had to grow together. And there were stressful times because I'm a very different person today than I was, 10 years ago when we got married. And so he's had to adjust to a more centered and a more healed and a more powerful woman, which can do, I know, all types of things to the male ego and the male psyche and a marriage, quite frankly. But then also in terms of friendships, I've lost friends, but I also I'm trying to remember if I have this mindset now or if I had it before, because I have felt the grief that you mentioned in terms of the loss, but also I have the knowing that you are fortunate if you have friends that last a lifetime. But so many people are in your life just for a season, and you learn together, you can grow together, but the hope is that you can in fact grow together, but that's not always the case, and then you can separate, and that's okay. You just hope the best for those people. And so I would say maybe it's been 50-50, but there's certainly a lot of friendship loss for me and my growth. But the folks who have been able to remain, there's a lot of power in people knowing you throughout your whole journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And for me, I believe that watching my mother go through change, there was a time in her life where she decided to leave the home church that she and my father had met in for several different reasons. And I remember that that was very difficult for my parents at that particular time, but also for the family, because it was a family church. And watching her decide for the reasons that she had at that point in time to move forward, because she thought it was better for me, for her daughter. She thought it was better for us, but my father wasn't willing to move. And that was the first point in my being a young daughter that I remember thinking, wow, that's pretty cool in terms of her willing to stand up for herself, not really knowing all of the dynamics why. So taking that lesson in other ways that my mother decided to grow for herself, and understanding the need to become her best self in various stages, and not finding that there was support across the board with other family members. Then when I moved on to becoming an adult, I thought about those experiences. I truly believe, Evelyn, that you have to do what's best for you at the time. It may not be best for you in terms of all of your relationships, but if you believe it's best for you at the time, then you have to move it forward, even though it's challenging, even though you may lose some relationships, even though it may be a mistake later on in life, because you never know. Challenge and change allows you to continue to grow and to empower yourself.
Oh my gosh, 100%. I wonder, when you saw that your mom chose to leave the church and your dad wasn't fully on board with the move, was there ever a part of you that started to think that change also could bring on fear? You feel like your foundation could be in jeopardy. How are you able to navigate that if that was the case? And do you find even today that making big decisions still carries a little bit of fear with it?
That's a great question. I do remember not necessarily being comfortable and being somewhat fearful. And I probably had my first therapy session that I can remember around that time, watching my mother grow, really seeing somewhat the pain that it was causing and strain on my parents' marriage. But then being able to understand how that was impacting me was probably the first time that I went to therapy, and beginning to feel comfortable with being honest about what was going on with me as a result of the actions and activities of the decisions of my parents. In terms of today, I've worked very hard not to live a fearful life. I've worked very hard to understand how fear impacts your decision making, but it also holds you back. It requires you to stretch yourself. If you're going to move beyond the fear, it requires you to not only face the challenge, but say, what's the worst thing that can happen? If I don't do this, what's the worst thing that could happen? And so one of the blessings in my life is that I have been a risk taker. I've tried new and different things, and my parents really encouraged that. And I appreciate the fact that they did that for me. So even now, as an adult, being in her 70s, I'm still moving myself forward, trying to navigate the world and try not to be fearful as often as possible.
That is incredibly beautiful. And it kind of is making me think that the relationship you had with your parents is almost an anomaly, coming from a time where therapy was not openly accepted, where families felt like we don't tell our business to other people. Like, what do you mean you're sitting there talking to somebody and telling them all the things? For you to be just supported in getting support for yourself is beautiful. Like that is not the norm.
You're right. It's not the norm. And what Donnica and I often talk about is that my mother, her grandmother, was really a woman before her time in terms of the way that she navigated life. She was a civil rights activist. Both my parents were moving through a time when you really had to step out and do the right thing for what you thought was important for the world, for your family, and for children. But she moved it forward, she pushed it forward, and she allowed us to take risks, my brother and I, and that was encouraging. So you're absolutely correct that wasn't even something that I think older generations understood.
Mhm.
So
I remember being a teenager and going through some teenage type stuff. And my parents they signed me up to start in therapy. But the thought was, here, Dr. So and so, fix my kid. So, there wasn't even a part of me that was like, oh, I could open up and be vulnerable here, because the whole premise is me being here means there's something wrong with me. And you're here to take that away from me. So I would say that that was like my first introduction to what therapy could potential, or that it even existed. But I had such a bad taste in my mouth from it at that time, because it was like, fix her. And I took that as there's something wrong with me. I need intervention. There's something wrong with me. So it wasn't until much later on my own and into marriage that I found therapy on my own for my own reasons, and really to be able to focus on wanting to connect more with myself instead of like judge and shame and try to fix me. So that happened much later for me.
I think that's very relatable to me. I didn't have an interest in therapy at all until I witnessed the benefits that it had for my mother. And but for seeing those shifts and then talking to her afterwards about how she navigated through and how helpful it was, the role that therapy played, did I then have an interest in having that additional support as I was going through whatever I was going through, whether it was professional or personal. And then, of course, after I went through my first therapy, not my first therapy session, but my first therapy experience, and I was like, oh my gosh, now I see the benefits. Now I see how it's helpful in moving forward and moving forward faster. I can be a pace-oriented person. And I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. Well,
Yeah, so much. And I think that I feel like that's something I wish people understood more, that getting therapy, getting help, whatever it is, mentorship, coaching, it's not about changing who you are. It's about helping you get to where you want to be faster because you have a guide, right? Like you have, it's almost like a GPS. Someone has experienced what you've experienced, and they can let you kind of look at your experience as just data as opposed to guilt and shame, right? You don't have to judge everything that you've done or everyone, every version of yourself that you've been. It's just your identity is shaped by your current experiences. And as you continue to evolve, your identity will shift as well. And I think that therapy gives such a beautiful outlet, first of all, to just to release all the things that you're carrying inside, because stories are worse in your mind. They just keep
Yeah.
on playing and playing until you
They
spit them
they
out.
do.
Right. But I also think that it's just a way to get you where you want to be faster and more connected.
You're right. I agree. Go ahead, Donica.
Oh, I was just going to say that I would not be where I am or have the life that I have without my last. She's actually a career coach. To your point, it can come in so many different forms. But I was still working in a corporate environment, and she really worked with me about being honest about what is it I truly wanted out of my personal and professional life. And it took some time. Apparently, I was very resistant at first,
Imagine
but
that.
but as I moved through it, then I was able to be honest with myself that I wanted to be closer to my family. I wanted to still, lean on all of the experience I had from my DC experience and this career I have built, but find a way to move it closer to family for both me and my husband. And so once I was able to be honest with myself, then I was able to move things forward, but only after doing that very difficult self work and uncovering what is it I truly want. Because apparently I was very reliant on what others felt about me and my experience and all of that, and not as tuned in as I could have been or perhaps should have been about what I wanted for my life.
I also, and Donica, I understand that so much. I remember some of our discussions about, do you really want to come back home? And the coming back home also has a certain amount, in some areas, maybe stigma to it. And yet she wasn't coming back home to come home. She and her husband made a choice to move back into our hometown of Dayton, Ohio, because of the life that they wanted to have and the experiences that Donica had shared with you. But I also think, Evelyn, it's very cultural not to necessarily embrace counseling or therapy in the way that we have both talked about it. And so it's understandable that there is the resistance because people who haven't gone through it have their impressions about what they think it is. Therapy is something where they're going to tell you what to do, or therapy is a situation where somebody's going to be blaming one person or the other person. And until you go through it, you realize that's not what it is. It is an opportunity to ask you some hard questions about you, your life, and what you so desire, which is why Donica has been able to move through this, I think, in a way that has been beneficial for her and for life in general. One of my dearest friends became a counselor. And when she was counseling, particularly students, she would share with me all the time. It was somewhat amazing to her to see her students really begin to open up and feel better about themselves. She was also a teacher, and she could talk about the fact of then how their work improved. So even from a youngster, having some of the hard questions, being a counselor, being a teacher, and seeing just how important that kind of growth was really helped.
And I think there's such a release to younger people when they're free to just be who they are. They're free to experience the things that they go through without feeling like there's going to be an added repercussion of your judgment. And I feel like that's one of the greatest gifts that I've given my daughters is recognizing that they are going to make mistakes. They are going to do things that I don't necessarily agree with, but also that's none of my business. It is not my business to raise them as puppets who do things the way I think they should be done or are free of mistakes. I can't even shield them from pain, which I would love to, but it is my job to teach them to be self-trusting and self-validating and to recognize that anything that they go through first, they have the resilience to help them get through it. And second, they have me to help them get through it. I won't allow myself to be an added stressor to things that happen in their life. And I think that kids need that so desperately. I saw that when I was a classroom teacher, when kids felt comfortable and they felt connected, literally just connected to you. It could be a Donica comes to the door in the morning and I put my hand on her shoulder and say good morning. That one small step helped them feel like, well, she really gives a damn about me, right? And you could see that as kids connected to you better, they perform better and they treat each other better. And one of the reasons that I ended up leaving teaching was that I felt like there was so little time to connect with kids. It was so much more, it became paperwork and policy and politics, and the connection was really missing, and it impacted me. I recognized at that time that I was giving my all to my classroom, to my work, to the children, and then coming home and not being the wife or mother that I wanted to be. So Donica, when you talked about wanting to come back home and having like those internal resistances, I felt that too. Like, I would say, like, first of all, I went to school for how long? And am I really going to just walk away from this? Did I just like waste my education? Am I just giving up? Am I now going to be dependent on my husband? And what does that look like? Am I teaching my daughters all the wrong lessons? Am I teaching them that they just, quit? But really, when I was able to just be radically honest with myself and say, I don't want this, I don't feel like Evelyn anymore, making that decision and leaving, I feel like was the catalyst to me becoming who I actually was. That was
Absolutely.
so difficult. And I feel like for a long time, for a long time afterward, people would send me emails, messages on Facebook, like, here's a job opening in this school district. And someone sent me a book in the mail, like something about for teachers, like how it's a lifelong calling. So I had the resistance of my own. I made the decision, and then everyone else was like, no, you need to go back.
Mhm.
You need to go back.
Mhm. Yeah, that's that's so relatable. When I'm listening to you, I'm also thinking my baseline was also, that you can do hard things. And so this is really hard, but you've done hard things before. This is just another hard thing. And you can always go back. Like in my particular case, I could always go back to another big corporation and do what I did. For you, you could always go back to teaching if you chose to. But what if I'm able to build something bigger and better than I had ever imagined? And so that's that dream, that vision is what I had to lean into. But also, I think it helped to know, number one, yes, you can do hard things. And number two, you can always step back, but it's harder to step forward.
Do you feel like you're currently in that realization of building the thing that's wilder and bigger and greater than you even expected?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was, and maybe we talked about this on our podcast. I can't remember about how my life has looked very different every 5 years, give or take. I'm in a position that I never would have thought about, that I never could have dreamed of, and is more resourced and more powerful than I even knew was possible. But it required, as we've discussed, risk taking, courage, trusting in yourself, asking for help, kind of all the things that we know that helps build that foundation to take that risk. But that has now caused me at this particular point to be even more of a risk taker because I know of what's possible on the other side.
How important is it, do you think, to also be surrounded by people that share that foundation of risk taking, but being willing to ask for help and being willing to self reflect? Like, how much do you think that impacts both your personal and your professional life?
It's incredibly important. I was trying to think of a bigger word than important. But it's needed because we are very impacted by our environments. I mean, I think there is some statistic or research out there. You are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so if you are, from a professional perspective, I feel if I'm the most successful person in a room, then I need to go into another room based on where it is I want to go. And so it's in it. Quite frankly, it's one of the things moving to a smaller market and a smaller city that I have to be really, really intentional about, because it's not the New York or the DC or the Chicago or the LA of a bunch of kind of big visionaries that are really pushing things forward in a certain type of way. Those people in that atmosphere exist in smaller cities, but you have to be more intentional about finding it. And so that was, first of all, it was a shock to me. But then second, it's also something that I've had to be really intentional about to make sure that I can continue to move things forward in the way that's important to me.
Amazing.
When you were asking Donica that question, Evelyn, it reminded me of a sermon I heard one Sunday in church when I was building my business. And the pastor indicated that if you have a dream, you want to be able to share that dream with people who can be individuals who can be nourishing, individuals who can help you to shape that dream, or individuals that just believe in you. Now, my dream was to build a new radio station, a broadcast property. And I can honestly say that just about everybody that I talked to outside of family would say, well, how are you going to do that? How much is it going to cost? How do you know to do? I mean, it was just one negative after another. Oh my goodness. Do you know that nobody's ever done that? Blah, blah. And it was very, very challenging for me. But the pastor said, don't share the dream with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Don't share what it is you want with everybody. Make sure that you're sharing with individuals who either love you so much that they're going to be encouraging whether you do it or not, or share with individuals who can help you to elevate to get to wherever that dream is. Best advice, because I clammed up. I stopped telling everybody what it is that I wanted to do and I was going to do. It did take me 10 years. So the other lesson that I learned is you have to have patience. It can take as long as it's going to take. But if it's truly for you and you keep working towards it, it can happen.
Yeah.
Or it changes shape. It may be something else, but don't give up.
That's exactly it. Like it can change as you change too. And that whole thought of no overnight success actually ever happened overnight. Like that's just not the way it works. You're reminding me of a conversation I had with my coach. Now I am a coach. I have a coach and my coach has a coach. Like we all know that you have to surround yourself, right, with people who are doing better than you and can guide you to be the best you. But I remember very early on in pivoting my coaching, and I had some serious doubts around my ability to market in the way that spoke to women who are on this identity journey, who are on this awakening. Because, marketing to fitness and nutrition is easy. That's the aesthetic, right? People are just looking for this outer experience, and that felt easier. But I remember her saying to me, Evelyn, you are gifted. God chose you to amplify this message. You are gifted. And she let me sit with that for a minute. And then she said to me, how dare you take that gift and hide it from the world?
Oh.
How, right? How are you sitting on this gold mine that is in your heart and in your mind and say, but I don't know if I should go out there and speak it? She's like, someone is praying for the answers that you can provide today, and you are choosing silence because you're afraid. And that really shifted everything for me, because even if, and again, she explained it. So what if you're not a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10 of where you want to be? If you're a 7, 1 through 6 can still be guided by you. You are still here for someone, but you're not reaching anyone if you sit at home in your thoughts all day, every day. So strong for me. So beautiful. I love that so much. Ladies, I think I could probably talk to you all day long, because I love your dynamic. I love how open you are with each other. I love how accepting you are of each other's experiences as individuals, but then how much it allows you to come closer together as a mother-daughter duo. What would you say that What would you say to mothers and daughters who potentially are having a difficult time navigating conversations? What's one step that they could take to ease like the anxiety around having difficult conversations and just allow themselves to be who they are as individuals?
That's a great question. I think that it's the mother's responsibility
Mm.
to allow her daughter to be honest and to begin by saying, I'm going to love you regardless of what you say to me, regardless of what you do. I am going to love you. I will also give you the best advice that I know, but this is your life. This is not my life. And so I would love for you to do what it is that you want to do and to be the best you. I'm going to listen. I'm going to give you the best advice I can. And then I'm going to support you on the decision that you make and move it forward. That's what I believe is most important.
And for me, I would say, from a daughter's perspective, do everything you can to connect with your mother because you only have one mother. However, if that relationship is causing more harm at the particular point where you were trying to reach out, you can find this level of support, you can find this level of compassion and empathy in others. You don't just have to be mothered by your mother. You can be mothered by mentors and sponsors or community leaders or in your church or a friend's mother. It can look so many different ways in your life. And so continue to seek out that support that you need. And if it's not happening in your home, first of all, it doesn't mean that it won't ever happen, but also do what you need to do to protect yourself and also reach out more broadly and get that support in other places.
That is such a beautiful way to look at things. You're making me, you're reminding me of when I talk to my daughters and I say, like, I understand sometimes things are difficult and you're not ready to bring it to me, but maybe write it in your journal. You can write me a letter if you wanted to. We have these mother-daughter journals that we share where if they have a difficult conversation they're not ready to talk about yet, they can write it out to me and then they just leave it on my bed and I can respond and I put it back on their bed. And then when they're ready to talk about it, we talk about it. But the rule is like there's nobody, we only bring it up if somebody says I'm ready. But also I've always told them like I surround myself with people who I trust and I know that they can turn to as well. So should they ever not feel comfortable saying to me, I hope that they feel comfortable saying things to me, but should they not, I want them to find someone like just, yeah, someone can help them through whatever they're going through. So Donica, thank you for sharing that because that's such a reminder that we can't always have control over the way things turn out immediately in those relationships and wanting that dynamic, but we can always reach out somewhere for the support. That's beautiful. Ladies, this conversation is so good. Thank you for sharing your relationship with us. Thank you for sharing everything that you do to help women everywhere. If people wanted to connect with you, where could they find you?
You can find us across all podcast platforms at Raised by Her Podcast, as well as all social media platforms at Raised by Her Podcast.
Beautiful. I'll make sure to link that in the show notes. Now, before I let you go, I have to ask the question of the hour. And that question is, in the Minding Mind community, we are all about being instinctual, intuitive, and really figuring out what works for us and dropping all the judgment that came from outside of ourselves. How does learning to live that way for yourself impact the legacy that you'll leave behind?
For me, it is so important to have continuous learning, to be open to that which I don't know, and to be able to try new and different things. I am working very hard on attempting to be further enlightened so that in this world where people are not always accepting, in this world where people are very fearful, in this world where we're going through challenges today that we could not possibly imagine on many, many levels, make sure that you are attempting to be enlightened about what's real in your life. Be open, be honest, and don't be fearful, but just try to move it forward in the best way you know how.
And for me, my goal for my legacy at this moment in time is to continue to be an example for others, to live my life in a way that demonstrates that you can push past your fear and you can have the life that you want to have no matter what. But you just keep pushing it forward, as well as providing young women with opportunities to do that in spaces and places where they might not otherwise have those opportunities.
I love that so much. Ladies, thank you so much for sharing yourselves with us. And I want to thank everyone else for joining the three of us today for this conversation and tuning into another episode of Minding Mine. If this episode resonated with you, I'm asking you to please comment, rate, and review the podcast. You know that your feedback helps me grow. And until next time, I want you to go live your life on your terms and please mind your business. We will catch you in the next episode.